Here's the story of the man who is generally considered America's first pro wrestling champion, Colonel James Hiram McLaughlin. And he wasn't just good at wrestling. For a time, he may have been the most feared man on the planet. I don't know how many more of these 1800s guys I'm going to cover, but this one is a must. While it would take decades for a lot of this to come to fruition in any sort of official way, here is when a lot of early pro wrestling ideas are kind of entering the universe. But again, for this one, we have another battle with history itself as far as accuracy, and especially with this one, myth-making and possible exaggeration. So at least some of the following information should be qualified with a meh. James Hiram McLaughlin was born June 8th, 1844 in Oriskany Falls, New York. Little is recorded, or I guess provable, of McLaughlin's parents and formal education, so we can skip right to JH being 15 years old and winning his first wrestling match, reportedly pinning a much older man, Hiram McKee. As the story goes, McKee followed JH after the match, outraged and yelling, embarrassed and protesting the match, so McLaughlin tossed him again, this time so hard he broke the dude's leg. A real Hiro Masuda situation. And just like Vero Small, who I just covered last episode, this is another collar and elbow wrestler, the Irish style of wrestling where you lock up and try to toss the other guy. But JH was also extremely talented at catch-as-catch-can. Think amateur wrestling style, but a little more violent. And James was quite good at wrestling because he was a big sumbitch. By adulthood, he reportedly stood 6'1" and weighed well over 200 pounds. A bigger guy for today, enormous for the time. And as you could have guessed from him slamming a grown-ass man and breaking his leg bone, these weren't beach muscles. He was strong. And keep in mind, this is the 1800s. There's no prayer and vitamin juice. There's no supplements. This is all taters. Fast forward again, James enlisted in the American Civil War in 1861. The good side. Serving first in the 26th New York Volunteers, where he rose to the title of captain. In 1863, he was part of the 24th New York Cavalry and attained the rank colonel by war's end. And JH would use the title colonel for his entire wrestling career because he was one. Unlike Sergeant Slaughter, who was neither a sergeant nor a horror movie villain. But even during the war, JH's reputation as a wrestler grew because wrestling just happened to be a common pastime amongst soldiers. Between battles, soldiers would challenge each other for entertainment, money, pride. And here is where Colonel McLaughlin really starts to become a legend. He was simply too big, too strong, too difficult to throw. The Confederacy is lucky they sent Sherman with fire and not McLaughlin with suplexes and DDTs. By the time the war ended in '65, McLaughlin was already known by the soldiers as an unstoppable grappler. The guys who lined up shoulder to shoulder and shot cannons at each other were like, I'm not f***ing with this guy. Pro wrestling wise, all JH needed was a crowd. And I mentioned this before, but after the nightmare hellscape that was the Civil War, there was this big rush for entertainment in America. What else are they gonna do? Deal with their PTSD like a common p***? And one of the things that rode the wave up with vaudeville, with carnivals, with sideshows was pro wrestling. Collar and elbow took over the Northeast, and catch-as-catch-can took over basically everywhere else. And again, Colonel could do both. Matches were held in theaters, town halls, circus tents, bars, athletic clubs. Gambling was common, if not the whole point, like today's NBA. By 1866, the Colonel was making moves. He defeated wrestler Louis Ainsworth and began claiming the title of American Collar and Elbow Champion. And just like the Vero episode, this is usually a claim more than like a physical title or a recognized title by some sort of governing body. But a group of wrestlers and promoters set off to change that. There was a major wrestling tournament organized in Detroit, Michigan. The best of the best were invited, although I think a few ringers sat it out. And again, at the time, wrestling had no central governing body. There was no official champion. They didn't even have merch and podcast. It was the goddamn Stone Age. So the promoters decided the tournament winner would receive a championship belt and the title of wrestling champion. Our Colonel entered and dominated. He defeated multiple challengers. I've heard up to 36, which sounds ridiculous, but either way, won the tournament, becoming possibly, literally, the first pro wrestling champion with a championship belt. And historically, I think there are rivals to this being the first belt, this being America's champion at all. But at least to the people in this tournament, JH was the best in the world. But here's where things get a little crazy. During one of these tournament matches, JH threw an opponent named Barney Smith just a little too hard. Accounts differ on what exactly happened. Some say Smith was thrown on top of his head, some say he hit a stage. Either way, Smith suffered severe injuries and later died from cranial trauma. There's also different accounts of whether that was like the next day, years later, but McLaughlin was devastated. He reportedly donated his tournament winnings to Smith's widow and later said, "I forgot I was so wicked strong." Maybe he said that. I didn't get a chance to watch his shoot interview. But in true pro wrestling fashion, this botch, this accident, ended up adding to McLaughlin's reputation. Like when Redacted broke Sabu's neck in ECW and became the Crippler. Difference being, JH could actually cut a promo, and also he didn't. After Detroit, JH spent the early 1870s traveling across the country defending his championship. So again, there's no formal territory or promotion, but this idea of a circuit, of a champion out on the road defending his belt, kind of floating around here. JH wrestled in cities like Detroit, Chicago, Buffalo, New York City, and matches were often arranged with large side bets. In a match in San Francisco in 1875, JH defeated a wrestler named Mike Whalen, earning a claimed $2,500 for the match itself, but also another $15,000 from betting on himself. That's roughly $500,000 in today's money, during an era when most dudes were working 18 hours in a coal mine for $1 and a hearty "f*** you." But McLaughlin's wicked strength would show up again, allegedly. There's a debate whether this is more myth-making or legit, but apparently Dutch Hogan also died after wrestling him. Another, Charles Mayer, was left permanently paralyzed. Eventually, JH announced that he would no longer compete in the rougher forms of wrestling. But again, it had already boosted his image. He was the strongest wrestler in America, something similar to the world's most dangerous man over 100 years before Ken Shamrock. One of the most famous matches in the Colonel's career took place in Boston, December 1876. The opponent was James "Red" Owens, and the stakes were the American Championship. And remember, in this era, a lot of these matches were still legit, and when two pros linked up, they could basically stalemate each other. This match lasted more than 5 hours, and at a point, both men were so exhausted that the referee tried to stop the match, but the crowd protested. The green shirt guy was pissed. So the wrestlers kept at it, and eventually Owens managed to win 2 falls and claimed the championship. After this match, this belt seems to sort of disappear into history if it existed at all, kind of like every mid-card title from the 90s and early 2000s. But this was the first time in years JH had been dethroned, and after suffering a major ankle injury, maybe in this match, maybe not, he decided to retire. For a while, he worked as a train conductor. Young people, a train is like an 1800s Uber. I don't know. Like almost every retired pro wrestler ever, he'd be back, and he would be fighting his way through matches in the late 70s and early 1880s. In fact, in 1878, well before Gotch and Hackenschmidt were putting on supercards, JH met another important, famous early wrestling pioneer, John McMahon. No relation to Vince. This match drew a massive crowd, large betting pools, and a lot of people think it was a work. JH won the first round, swinging bets one way. McMahon won the next round, swinging bets the other way. And then JH lost his second fall and the best of 2 out of 3. They met about a month later, with the Colonel getting the win. But by the mid-1880s, a new generation was emerging. While JH was off playing trains, William Muldoon was coming up. He was faster, younger, and the two would meet in 1884. They ended up splitting the feud, but the rematch victory for Muldoon gave him something very important. Just tying a legend like JH put the kid over. The torch had been passed, and Muldoon would become the next great pro wrestling star. But our Herculean war hero wasn't about to go sit on a farm for the rest of his days. In 1901, nearly 60 years old, James traveled north during the Klondike Gold Rush. There, in frontier towns like Dawson City, wrestling matches were staged for the gold miners. JH was part of a traveling troupe of wrestlers. There are reports, rumors, that on that troupe's roster was a very young wrestler named Frank Kennedy, an alias, whose real name is Frank Gotch, future world champion and one of the first mainstream megastars in pro wrestling. And these Yukon matches with the traveling troupe seemed to be exhibitions. Maybe some were staged, maybe some weren't, but what was definitely real is that JH was still a draw, even up in Canada. And in these packed houses in places like Dawson City, JH still wrestled, even beating promoter Joe Carroll, also known as Old Marsh. So even in his late 50s, the Colonel was still getting wins. After the Yukon tour, McLaughlin finally stepped away from pro wrestling forever. He spent his final years prospecting for gold in Alaska, and that is where he'd pass away at the age of 61 in September 1905, dying in Fairbanks from Bright's disease, an old-timey way to say inflammatory kidney disease. And today, JH rarely pops up in mainstream wrestling discussions, but the facts are, he was a national draw, and some of the earliest ideas of what pro wrestling would be, the idea of a federation with a champion who others had to beat if they wanted to be champion, kind of starts here. There's also an argument to be made that some of the legend surrounding JH, it's some of the earliest versions of gimmick building and kayfabe and working the marks. And he was like the first of that Lou Thez, Harley Race, Terry Funk, Ric Flair style of champion, as far as here comes the champion to your town to pop the territory. And while it was often legit competition and a way different style than any fan would recognize today, this Civil War colonel, this gold hunting explorer, legit bone-smashing tough man, was laying the foundation for everything we know pro wrestling as today. That was Colonel J.H. McLaughlin.